Welcome to the Christian Men at Work podcast, where I interview men from all walks of life with varying job titles who have one thing in common. They are all choosing daily to live out their Christian faith through their work, and because of that they are leading, prospering, glorifying God, and experiencing joy and purpose in their work, and you can too. Men at Work, welcome to episode 35. Today I'm going to be interviewing Dan Forrest. For those of you who live in North Carolina, you don't need an introduction. He is our lieutenant governor, and he's a great one at that. And many of you who live outside of North Carolina are probably familiar with Dan Forrest. I've admired him and respected him for a while, and I was able to ask him to do this interview after getting to know his staff just a little bit, attending his well-known men's retreat that he has here in North Carolina that I attended this year, and it was fantastic. So let me get right to the introduction and the interview. Dan Forrest has served as Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina since January 2013. Prior to becoming Lieutenant Governor, he received 2 degrees from the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. After college, Dan became a leader in the business community for over 20 years, having served as office president and senior partner of the state's largest architectural firm, Little Diversified Architectural Consulting. Dan has been designated as an architect emeritus. A father of 4, he and his wife Alice reside in Wake County. As Lieutenant Governor, Dan serves as the president of the North Carolina Senate and serves as a voting member of the State Board of Education and the State Board of Community Colleges. On the State Board of Education, he's the chairman of the Special Committee on Digital Technology, which is tasked with the implementation of the statewide digital technology plan. In addition, Dan is a member of the North Carolina Advisory Commission on Military Affairs, the Food Manufacturing Task Force, and serves as chair of both the Energy Policy Council and the Board of Post-Secondary Education Credentials, so he's a busy man. Let's get right to this great interview.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for joining the conversation today. Appreciate it. And I'm just going to start out with my first question, which is, when and how did you become a Christian?
Oh, well, why don't you just dive right in there? That's a good place to start. Well, it goes back. It's actually a fairly long story, but I grew up in the church, went to a series of churches that I would say I don't really ever remember hearing the gospel in. I'm not saying it wasn't preached. I just really don't remember it. So wasn't a Christian as a young kid, but I did go to church and I read the Bible, and I certainly believed in moral things, and didn't always live that lifestyle, and went off to lived with my dad for a few years in Columbia, South Carolina. Went down to play football and lived with him, and started going to a Baptist church down there that I started hearing the gospel preached for the first time, and it touched my heart, and I went forward and thought this was a good thing to do, and I did that, and but really nothing changed in my life, so to speak. Went off to college and was just living a pretty carefree life, and certainly didn't really have any fruits from any decision that I made there. And then I got married and started having kids, and there was a day back in 1996 in September, and the Billy Graham crusade was in Charlotte, and my wife and I were there, and Dr. Graham was preaching, and my wife wanted to go down to the field, and she went down and accepted Christ and started getting really engaged in a Kay Arthur Bible study. She was a Bible study on Romans, in fact, and she came home one night. I remember I was laying on the couch, and she came home, and she was just talking about heaven and talking about death, and there's this level of excitement in her voice about the next life. And I looked at her. I remember looking at her and saying, "I don't think I have what you have." And we were in this program at the time called Charlotte Leadership Forum, and these 4 older gentlemen who were followers of Christ were pouring into our lives, and there are a lot of things going on. As I like to say, a lot of God incidences happening in our life at one time, and a lot of impact there. And so, I had sin in my life, and I wasn't following the Lord, and I knew it. And I got down on my knees and told God that I wanted to turn my life over to Him. And that's kind of where back in early 1997 that my wife and I just kind of started this journey together, and that's pretty much how it all came together.
Well, I can relate to you about being led by a godly woman. That's certainly part of my story. I love to hear when someone was partly affected by a Billy Graham crusade. It's just amazing how many people can say that.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And God gave me so many awesome opportunities after that in life. I got to, as an architect, be one of the principals on the Billy Graham project being moved from Minneapolis down to Charlotte for their headquarters. So I got to work on that and got to meet all the players, involved in that, and got to work on the Billy Graham Library project, and actually went and presented to, Franklin and his team, and Greg Laurie was on his board at the time, and just had unbelievable opportunities related to the whole Billy Graham organization. Later in life, had nothing obviously to do with my conversion experience or my wife's conversion experience, but it was just a cool God thing to allow me to have that opportunity.
That is very cool, and yeah, I've taken my family to the library. It's a beautiful place. Well, speaking about your life as an architect, you spent about 20 years as an architect. What made you want to become an architect?
Well, I'm probably like every kid out there, growing up playing with Legos, drawing houses, drawing house plans, kind of having this artistic side on one half of your brain, and more construction-oriented or engineering side on the other half of the brain. And I actually went to engineering school at the University of South Carolina for 2 years. People were telling me, I wanted to be an architect. They're saying, you need to be an engineer. The engineers are where all the money is these days. So I went into engineering school at South Carolina, and I hated it from day one. Excuse me, I left there after 2 years. I like to tell people right before they kicked me out, I walked out. And ended up going to UNC-Charlotte and getting in the architecture program, and fell in love with it day one, and knew that that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I should be doing. And I loved really every minute in the architectural profession for those 20 years.
Wow, it's great to hear anyone say that, about a career. What are some of other than the projects that you mentioned, Henry, are there one or two projects that really stuck out that meant a lot to you?
Well, there were a lot. My career was really spent. My firm did a little bit of everything. We were the largest firm in the state here in North Carolina, but pretty large national firm too. So we did projects all over the place. But my specialty was office buildings and corporate interiors, and I did that for the entire career that I was in architecture, working for one firm. So I wouldn't say that the projects I worked on weren't always moving types of projects like the Billy Graham project was, which absolutely was. I love that opportunity. But, a lot of corporate work, a lot of corporate interiors for people that drive through the Triangle area in Raleigh. I always point out to them what was the Quintiles building. It's now called IQVIA. It's on 40 at 540 interchange there, and it's one of the notable ones. But a lot of corporate office interior work. I had fun doing it. It was fun to work with corporate clients. It was fun to design interiors projects and building projects for them. I don't have any regrets from doing it. I enjoy doing all of them.
Is it fair to say that the next phase of your career was in politics, if I understand it correctly? And if that's true, can you talk a little bit about how you got into politics? Am I correct in saying that your mother was involved in politics? Did that have an influence on you?
I don't know. It may have had an influence. I grew up in a political family. My mother she was the mayor of Charlotte for a couple terms. She was the first female mayor there. She was a member of the United States Congress from the Charlotte area as well, and she served there for 18 years. So kind of grew up in a political family where all you do is sit around and talk about politics at at the dinner table as you're growing up. And I never really liked doing that every day, but I find myself doing it now. And my family doing it too. It's unfortunate, but that's part of the life of a politician. But I always said that I wasn't going to get involved in politics. I thought, it's too much of a sacrifice for a family. I saw that there's nothing really sexy about it. There's nothing glamorous about it, and it's very tough, sacrificial work. I saw my mom do that, and how grueling it was on her, and how much family time she had to miss to do that. And I just said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that with my family. But I really felt called. It was something that was really a calling, and in a very short period of time, I ended up leaving my architecture firm. It was just really a matter of weeks because the calling was that strong. And so I stepped out really on faith. And at the time, I didn't have a salary and didn't have any benefits and any of that kind of stuff. I didn't know where the next paycheck was going to come from, but I felt so strongly about it that I had to leave it behind. And when I say it was a great career that I loved, I really do mean that. And I had a great company and great people that I worked with, and so it was a pretty crazy thing to do. And that was in the middle of a recession as well back in 2009. So to say my wife is amazing to go along with that is an understatement. But I left that behind, and the Lord provided in really just amazing ways. And my partners were great, and they bought me out, and it afforded me the opportunity to live without a job and without a salary for a couple of years while we ran for office. So, as I just tell people, when you really call to do something, you just have to go do it. You really can't deny it, and it really doesn't matter what the cost is. You just have to go out and go for it and do it.
So you got elected lieutenant governor, and then you were reelected in 2016 by large margins. I know you're a popular governor. I'll just ask the question right now. Everyone I know who knows who you are wants you to become our governor. Is there anything you want to say about that?
Not at this time, but we will at the appropriate time, if I can just leave it at that.
No problem. So let's talk a little bit about your service so far. What are some highlights of serving as lieutenant governor? I know you've been involved in some real high-profile issues, and I know you have a lot of responsibilities as lieutenant governor. What are some of the things that, I guess, for you have been most important?
Well, one of the things that we do that's just a duty is just presiding over the Senate, being the president of the Senate. You preside while, all the deliberations are going on and the bills are being passed, and that's an honor to be able to do that. It's a great body of people that really do, regardless of what party you're in, they love their state, and they do want what is best for the state, and there may be ideological differences there, but everybody's making a great sacrifice to be there and be a part of it. So I really enjoy serving with the members of the Senate. We spend a lot of time on education, and pretty passionate about that. I just get real passionate when I see, kids that, because of the zip code they live in or because of their socioeconomic status don't have the same opportunity for an excellent education that other kids have. And one of the reasons why I took on the digital learning platform, and I chair the subcommittee for digital learning, and we had a goal to say we wanted to put together a digital learning plan to transform the way that teachers teach and students learn in North Carolina for the 21st century, and we're very successful in the process of doing that. And we work with obviously Department of Public Instruction and the Friday Institute and others to make that a reality. And we are in the process of rolling that out still, but one of the accomplishments there, and we played an integral role in this, was to be the first state in the nation to have every single classroom connected to high-speed broadband. And, we're one of the most rural states in the country, so to be a state that is that rural and be the first to accomplish that, was a goal that I had. Long before we actually did it, I said, I believe we will do this, and we did. We worked with the General Assembly for funding, as well as making multiple trips to Washington, D.C. to work with the FCC. And, we're putting $100 million a year into that project right now. And what that does, the so what behind that is now it really doesn't matter what your zip code is. Any kid in any classroom can connect to the internet and can have access to the best and brightest teachers, the best content and curriculum out there from wherever you happen to sit in North Carolina. And that's going to provide opportunity to kids that haven't had opportunity before. If there's a kid that's excellent in math, they can, connect to the School of Science and Math, and they can learn from the best and brightest there, and they can excel at their pace. And that's going to transform the way we teach and the way students learn, and I'm pretty excited about that. And we could go on talking about school choice opportunities. We've opened up school choice opportunities in our state, and making sure that parents have the ability to choose an excellent education for their kids as well. So I'm proud of that. And, we've given teachers raises 6 years in a row in North Carolina. No other state has done that. We're moving more quickly at that than any other state. We're giving, principals compensation increases. We've invested about $2 billion new dollars into education since we've been in charge. So a lot going on there. But as I want to remind people, it's not about the inputs. It's about the outcomes for the students, and that's what's most important.
Well, I wanted to ask you a few questions just to get your thoughts on the integration of faith and work, which is kind of ultimately what this podcast is about. But before I do, we also this is primarily I think the folks who listen to this are primarily men, and I wondered if there's anything you could share with us about the men's retreat that you've been a part of creating here in North Carolina.
Yeah, when I first got elected, I kind of had the opportunity since I became a believer to be a part of a number of retreats, a number of Christian men's retreats, and it's always been very rewarding, even for me, to be a part of that. I've put on a lot of them through the years, and even, being the person who's putting them on, I still get as much out of them as everybody else. So we wanted to have an opportunity to pull together men of faith from all over the state of North Carolina to come together and pray together and, listen to great speakers together and be encouraged and motivated together, and then go back and, impact your families and your workplace and your communities and your churches and those types of things. And so we started the Black Mountain Men's Retreat a few years ago, and every April now we will be doing that. This coming year we'll be at the Cove, Billy Graham's Cove, and we hope to have a record crowd there this year, and we'll keep doing it as long as the Lord allows us to.
Well, yeah, I was able to go this year, and it was awesome. Highly recommend it. So I wanted to ask you now some questions about work, and specifically, what does living out your faith through your work mean to you?
I'd sum it up like this. One of my mentors used to say he always found it interesting when people would say, well, tell me about your spiritual life. And he said, well, is there any other part of it? That all parts of our life are spiritual life. So there's no separation of our relationship with Jesus Christ when we become believers. You don't separate that in your, church and then your family and your workplace. You're not multiple people. You're just one person who is driven by one set of principles. And so I hope that I'm the same person at home that I am at work, and that I am with my kids, that I am with my wife, that I am with my friends, that people will see that transparency in me. I don't deny God. I don't shy away from God. I don't deny talking about him, or if you really believe that God is who he says he is, that he created us from nothing, and he puts the breath in our lungs, and he makes the blood flow through our hearts, and he's the creator of the universe and created it all from nothing. If you believe all that, then you will trust in the Lord, and you will follow him, and you will tell people about him. And if you believe that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and he is your Savior, and he did redeem you from something that was broken and turn you into something new, then you want to tell people about that as well. I'm not called to preach as lieutenant governor, but when you have opportunities, you don't shy away from talking about the truth either. And we live in a culture where certainly, this notion of truth being relative is a dangerous thing. And so I believe in absolute truth, and I'm just not going to separate those things in what I do. So, we go about our job every day just like everybody goes about their job. And just in the world of public service and, trying to have an impact on culture, there are just more opportunities here to, have the opportunity to talk about God and his impact on your life, and how you believe he has, created man and sent us forth to live in a certain way, and to truly love our neighbors and to love our enemies. And there's a lot of crazy concepts in there in the world of politics that I believe are just as true today as they were 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, if I could zero in on the loving the neighbor thing, I mean, there's so much so much conflict and disagreements today. I mean, that's true in general as well as, I guess you could say in the workplace. Do you have any thoughts on how to interact with people that we disagree with, whether it's at work or anywhere else? Or another way I phrased it in the past is how to get along with people that are difficult to get along with at work. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'll take the first approach. You said, how do we engage? I think the first thing we do is engage. I think we live in a culture today that separates itself. People automatically, put themselves into certain buckets and separate themselves out into certain ideologies and certain groups. If you're on the right, you go get your news and your media from sources on the right. If you're on the left, you go get your news and media from sources on the left. And you attend events with people that you agree with, and you just don't find any opportunities to be friends. I mean, what I tell people about politics is, turn politics off for a while. There's a lot more to life than politics, right? I mean, our founding fathers knew that. Certainly the great philosophers of ancient days knew that politics was a part of life, but it wasn't everything. And so we live in this world that's so over-politicized right now that everything becomes about politics, and it's kind of a shame because it wasn't that way when I was growing up. And we had neighbors that I'm sure were all political affiliations. I had no idea what their political affiliation was, but the kids all played together and the families all ate together and we hung out and we enjoyed life together. And it doesn't seem like people can do that anymore. And so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that I think if the church was doing its job and loving one another, I mean, the Lord said that they will know me by the way you love one another. So first the church has to love each other, and we don't do that very well. And then we need to love if we love our neighbors as we love ourselves, then all these problems that we're talking about will go away. But we don't even know our neighbor. We drive home and we roll into our garage and our garage door closes behind us and we stay in our house and nobody even knows who you are, so your neighbors could be, suffering from cancer or some kind of disease, or, they could, be on tough financial times and we would never even know it. Right. So I think that is the big challenge that we face right now is that we don't know who our neighbors are, so how are we going to love them?
Well, I agree with you, and that's a lot of good advice in terms of dealing with, everyone around us. So do you have a favorite scripture or life verse that you lean on, either in general or maybe in this season?
Oh, boy, it depends on the day, really. I've really been doing a lot of studies just on joy and, the joy of the Lord is our strength, and making sure that I'm focusing on that because I can get cynical with all the crazy and negative things going on in this world, and I don't want to be a cynic. And so I try to focus on joy a lot. And, I think Romans 12:1 is probably, if I had a life verse, is probably the one that, I go to the most often, therefore, if you have God's mercy, offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. Your spiritual act of worship, do not be conformed any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so I have to go through this transformation on a regular basis to make sure that my mind is set in place, that I'm not conforming to things of the world that can, are very slippery sometimes, kind of sneak into your life. And they may look good and sound good to the world, but they don't look good and sound good to God. So I have to focus on that, and to know that we are to be living sacrifices. That God doesn't need any dead sacrifices, and so He calls us to be living sacrifices, and we're supposed to go out and honor the Lord in that way. So there's things that I try to do. I'm not perfect at it. My wife could probably tell you I'm not even good at it sometimes, but those are things that are front and center in my mind.
Oh, those are some good ones. Thanks. Do you have any suggestions? Myself, I've got a long commute. A lot of men do. Things you like to listen to kind of maximize your commute time to work back and forth to work?
Well, I'm an Audible.com junkie, so I do lots of books on tape, if you will. I used to call them books on tape, digital books. And so I listen to a lot of things now, and I have a general goal of trying to do somewhere between 30 and 50 books a year. And so it's a whole variety of things. I love C.S. Lewis, so I try to listen to and understand as much C.S. Lewis as I can, or read as much as I can. My brain's not exactly that big, but I do enjoy it. And I like a lot of apologetics things as well. It's just something that has always fascinated me, so I do that. But I mix things up. So what I typically do when I'm in the car is I do fiction and nonfiction, and I throw random new books in there that are like Love Does and those kind of things that are whatever the popular kind of Christian things are of the day. And I'll listen to those as well, so I try to stay abreast of some of that stuff. But I just mix stuff up. I'm really pretty eclectic and all over the place.
That sounds good. Yeah, Audible's great. Well, if anyone wanted to learn more about you, reach out to you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, I mean, if they personally want to reach out to me, they can just contact my office, Lieutenant Governor's office, and that's probably the best way to do that. Other than that, certainly danforest.com is our website, and we have multiple websites. We have our Facebook page, and you can kind of follow us on Facebook at Dan Forest NC on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all those crazy things that we do as well. So there's a lot of ways to for people to follow what we're doing. But if they just want to want us to speak somewhere, want us to come to some event somewhere, contacting our office is the way to do that.
Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
I don't think so. I think that was pretty broad there. Just say thanks for allowing me the opportunity to share a little bit of my story, and thanks for what you do with your podcast and allowing people to do this and get the message out there and continuing to spread the truth. So we appreciate the opportunity to do it.
Well, I thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a good evening.
You too. Take care now.
All right, bye.
Men at Work, I hope you've enjoyed this interview as much as I have. We just heard about Dan Forest's journey being spirit-led and living out his Christian faith through his work. Each of our journeys are unique, but hopefully you've heard something in this episode to inspire you and give direction for your own personal daily work life. You can find links and other information from this show at davehilgendorf.com. Until next time, have a great day and God bless.